Damian Lillard. And Damian Lillard, obviously one of the best players in the NBA. He will be a future Hall of Famer. He was named to the top 75 team. There, some people may dispute that, but the fact of the matter is,
I dispute it. But
yeah, but the fact of the matter is, he's officially on it, so He's officially a top 75 player. But his team this year, Portland, is horrific. 31-40. Not even in the hunt, essentially, for the play-in. They're 3.5 games back from that, which doesn't seem like a ton. But, Rob, they've lost 6 straight. They've lost 8 of their last 10. Just a bad team. And Damian Lillard now is in his 11th season. And he has been adamant, Rob, about staying in Portland. And while I respect his competitiveness, individually, like, I don't want to join a super team and win it that way. I respect his loyalty to a franchise that, drafted him out of Weber State, obviously not a national powerhouse. I get all that. And even to that community, obviously he is, really made a mark in that community, not only as a basketball player, but just as a human being and all that stuff. I get all that and I respect it. But I want to ask you this, Rob. At what point does Damian Lillard staying in Portland go from being noble to just kind of being sad? It's not a bad, you can't rip him for doing it, but does it ever go from being noble to being sad?
I don't think so. If that's what he wants to do and that's his career for him, I mean, we talk about it. You talk about Chris not taking the most money and staying if you're happy somewhere. If he enjoys being there, he enjoys that the team that took a chance on him and he's happy and he would rather win his way or where he's the main guy, or it doesn't happen. Charles Barkley didn't win. There's a lot of great players who didn't win. So I think that he can look at that and say, if it wasn't meant or it wasn't in the cards for me, then I can accept that. I went out, I played as hard as I could. They tried to get some other players around, but I wouldn't look at it as sad, because there are players who moved around trying to win championships and they didn't win either.
Right.
So there's no guarantee. You can move around and be chasing something that you don't get.
Yeah, I'm not going to rip him for this. Because, Rob, I've said it before and I'll say it again, and it needs to be noted by people that there are only 2 normal-sized point guards. Magic Johnson was not a normal-sized point guard. He was 6'8". There are only 2 normal-sized point guards, Rob, that led their teams to multiple championships. Isaiah Thomas, the legend in Detroit, and Steph Curry. That's it. It is hard as a smaller point guard or, just an average size, 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", to lead a franchise to become an NBA champion. Now, in Seattle in 1979, you had the Supersonics win it, Rob, with Gus Williams, who was 6'2". Yep. But then it's arguable who was the best player on that team. It was Gus Williams. It was Dennis Johnson. It was Jack Sickman. You know what I mean? Like, they had a group of guys that were all
was that
really top
Lenny Wilkens
players.
Was the coach,
Lenny
right?
Wilkens was the coach. Yep, that was his championship. And so, he was, I think Gus was their leading scorer that year, but it was, some might argue Dennis Johnson was their best player, and he was 6'4", kind of a bigger point guard. But my point is, Dame not being able to lead his team to the finals or to a championship is not something to, rip him about. Because, Rob, am I wrong? Outside of those 2, and if you want to throw in Gus Williams, I doubt you want to, but outside of those 2, nobody could do it. Steph and Isaiah. But what I'll say about this is the guys you mentioned, you said, guys that didn't win championships. Barkley, Ewing, Karl Malone, their teams were always in the hunt.
Right.
And that's the difference now with Portland. I mean, Dame is obviously still in his prime, and his team's not even in the hunt. And he is on a different trajectory with all the other top players, best players on his team. Anthony Simons, and they got, Shaden Sharp. They got some young talent, but it's young talent. And they're not ready to win yet. And by the time they get ready to win, Dame will probably be older. So it's just, they got Jeremy Grant. I get it. But he's not a star. He's putting up numbers there in a losing situation. I think this, Rob, and I'm like you said, and I've said it before, I can't rip Dame because if he's happy there, this is life, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer. And, so that it's fine if that's what makes him happy. All I would say is this. If I were him, I'd talk to like Kevin Garnett. And Nick Wright mentioned this on our show, First Things First. I was actually thinking it, but Nick said it. Rob, when Kevin Garnett, he didn't want to leave Minnesota.
No, he had to be talked into it.
Right.
I remember that.
Even though he was going to what would have potentially been a great situation. He knew Paul Pierce was there. I don't remember who got traded first, Ray Allen or Garnett.
I think it was Garnett
Ray was
and then
traded
Ray,
first.
right?
Okay,
was
Ray was
Ray?
traded first.
Oh, okay.
So think about it. They already had Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen, and KG still didn't want to go. And it had nothing to do, Rob, with a potential super team because at that point, nobody was really thinking of it that way.
But
and
it wasn't.
Was a trade.
It was
too.
trades, right?
It
so
wasn't
nobody.
player
You had to give up something to get them, right?
Right. And so he finally gave in and accepted to being traded there. They obviously won a championship. They competed for other championships, got to the finals one more time. And he said, Rob, when he was done, his only regret is that he didn't go to Boston sooner. And so here's what I just say to Dame. Like, first of all, he could still have maintained a great relationship with Portland because KG did it with Minnesota, right? I almost bought that team, Rob, or got into the ownership. I think Portland, I'm not saying they want to trade Dame, but if he went to them and talked to him about it, Rob, I almost think there'd be some relief. Not that he's not great anymore, but again, they're on different trajectories. They could get a bunch of young talent or picks, and he could potentially go somewhere where he could compete for a championship. And Rob, when people think of KG, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen, and they were going to be Hall of Famers anyway, right? But people don't say or think they couldn't lead a team on their own to a championship. And they couldn't. The Boston was bad when Pierce, like when Antoine Walker left and Pierce was there kind of as the only star. They weren't very good. Ray Allen couldn't lead teams. He had some pretty good teams in Seattle and Milwaukee, but never got to a championship. And obviously Durant, they missed the playoffs several years in Minnesota with him leading the way. And so they only think, man, that was a great Celtics team and they're champions. And so I think like for Dame, Rob, he could get traded. Like Westbrook was in this same situation. Remember, he was wanting to be loyal. And eventually OKC was like, look, we got to move on. It's not working. And now he's bounced all over the place. And Rob, you could get traded somewhere. This isn't Westbrook's case, but where you're really older and you might win a championship, but you're older, Gary Payton, that type of situation where people don't really, okay, it's nice you won a title, but it wasn't you necessarily the driving force. Dame could still be a driving force, like a 1A or second option or whatever to a great player and maybe win a championship. And if he were to go later in his career where he's a role player, not as big a part of it, it wouldn't mean as much. So look, it's his decision. I respect him, but those are things I would think about if I were him. And you know this, Rob, his legacy's great. We went over it. Hall of Famer, top 75. But winning a ring would take it to another level.
I mean, there's no doubt you want to win, but I just don't think he's cut like that. I really don't. Especially, I think there's something about him, Chris, because of the school he played at and how he was overlooked his whole life. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that, where you just feel like I don't need to do what everybody else is doing. He's made a ton of money. He's got plenty of notoriety. He's a big fish in a small pond. And I really believe that he's content, and if he wins one, because he knows every player doesn't win. It's not possible, even great players. So if it's not that important to him, I can't see him at some point. And if the team moves on, that's one thing. But I don't think he'll be the guy saying, "No, I got to go. I need to go because I'm trying to win a championship, or I'm getting old, or I'm the years are ticking away or melting away." So I would be surprised. I think that they like the idea that if you're in Portland, it's hard to attract people. Free agents anyway, Chris. Forget about if you draft people.
I can't even think
it's hard to get anybody to come
free
there.
agent who's
Right.
gone there.
So
like
if you got a guy who
time.
loves it and wants to be there, then that's why they'll want to keep him around.
Well, I do think at the very least, Rob, and he doesn't even have to drive. It could be either side. I think a conversation this offseason is warranted. Not whether it's him or them. Because, again, where are they going?
Home, dinner, maybe a show?
Right. That's about it. I mean, you have to say, look, we need to either move this young talent that we have to bring in a star to play with Dame and give ourselves a real chance, or we need to consider moving Dame for young talent. And so I just think that discussion needs to be had, and maybe they decide we'll stay here, but this is where you're at. This is what you essentially are. You're a poor team right now. Now, maybe he thinks they'll be better when these young guys mature next year, but I don't know. I don't see them, really anytime soon competing for that Western Conference title. But what say you? 877-99 on Fox, 877-996-6369. At what point, if at all, does Damian Lillard's loyalty to Portland, loyalty to staying with the team that drafted him, does it ever move from being noble to being sad? Your thoughts, and should he try to move on? 877-99 on Fox. All right, shopping for tires can be deflating. You know it. I know it. They also know it at TireRack.com. That's why they give you fast